going to do is we are going to expand on the last project that we did. So the last project we did was called the ball drop. So we literally created a ball or some kind of object and we dropped it, and we didn't have any bounce. It just hit the ground, made a little noise using those little lines, and called it a day. So that method, we didn't talk about it, but that method is called the straightforward method. What do I mean by that? What that is basically if we were to drop the ball, we are doing all of the shapes all in succession, one right after another, in the order of which they drop. Okay, but there's another method. It's called the pose-to-pose method, which we'll get into during this project, which will make your life a little bit easier. So this project's a little different. So instead of dropping the ball from the center, what we're going to do is we are actually going to throw it in from the side. So if you're not familiar, if you throw a ball that is bouncing, it's going to be thrown across the screen, hit the ground, kind of bounce again a few times, and then roll away. So what we're doing is we're looking for something that kind of does something like this. And then obviously, as I said, roll away. So we can do one of two methods. We can do the straightforward method, which in this case, let me turn these off, would be if we were to put these all in a row, our ducks in a row. We would throw that ball in, and it would follow that path exactly like I've drawn it in order. The difference between that and the pose-to-pose would be that we would now start talking about the extremes and the in-betweens. The extremes would be the highest and the lowest, and the in-betweens would literally be in between. But besides for that, if we actually think about the way that a ball is thrown, a ball, due to gravity, when we throw it up in the air, it kind of hovers for a second right before it starts coming down. And so animators discovered this, or observed this rather, and they added it in the animation, especially in Disney in their early days. They really did a lot with slow in and slow out, which is the other concept that we're going to talk about. So the difference between just doing a normal straightforward, hey, here it goes, versus putting a slow in and slow out, is that instead of being evenly spaced like this ball is, what we're going to do is we're going to stretch these out a little bit, where they're going to bunch up a little bit more towards the beginning and towards the end, but then in the center there's going to be a little bit larger of a gap. The reason being is we kind of want to like speed this up a little bit, so then this way these are a little bit slower, and then here we're just doing this transition because we're going to be back down a little bit slower, so then this way we have that chance for it to exaggerate the bounce. So we probably could do without one of these maybe, but we're going to do something with that in just a second. Now, when we go to do pose to pose, it actually helps us do slow in and slow out a lot easier. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with the extremes first. So this ball here is my highest point at which the ball is going to be. This next one is, you can see how I've numbered these 1 and then 2. You don't have to number them. I just did it for the sake of trying to do this project. So I did the highest that it could go, and then I made a copy and I put it at the lowest that it could go. Then what I'm doing is I'm finding a spot in the middle. Now notice that I'm leaning a little bit more towards the beginning rather than the end on this, because again, it's going to be starting off slower and then speeding up as it goes to hit the ground. Next, I'm going to start with the in-between between that. Again, I'm going to make sure that I'm sticking a little bit more towards the beginning rather than the middle here, because I, again, want to emphasize that slow in. Okay, and you can see here where I'm really putting it towards the middle because I want to emphasize it being faster down this side. So anyway, so I can continue these, going the in-betweens, and then you can see how this is similar to the last set of balls that I had shown. Now the difference is I did add a couple. You can see I put these in as zeros, and the only reason why is because I noticed that there was a big gap, so I kind of had to fill that little spot. So I added more, and you may find that you need to add more of these or less than these, whatever your feeling is, how fast your ball is going, the less shapes. Now be careful, don't do too little shape, because then it's just going to look like it's kind of like appearing and disappearing in all different spots on your path here. We want them at least a little bit closer, so then this way the eye doesn't get fooled too much, or notice how we're trying to fool them, rather. All right. So anyway, we talked about the post-pose. We talked about slow in and slow out. Now there's one more element that we're actually going to focus on here. So I just wanted to show you all the other stuff with this slow in and slow out and the pose to pose. The slow in and slow out is important for us. The pose to pose or the straightforward method, you can go with either or, whichever makes sense for the project that you're working on at that time. That's the method that you choose. There are benefits one over the other, but it's not like you're going to be wrong if you choose one or the other. The other thing, though, that the principle of animation that we're going to emphasize in this project is that we're going to talk about squash and stretch. So, again, I kind of hinted towards it before, which is another principle, is exaggeration. We kind of want to exaggerate this fall. So with the exaggeration of the fall, we want to exaggerate the shape of the ball to emphasize speed. So what we're going to do is we're going to squash and stretch our ball, so then this way it appears like it's bouncing up, speeding up, hitting the ground, and then going to repel up. So what I did here is I did that pose to pose again, but you can see how I've changed the shape of the ball. At the top, the ball is its perfect shape. It's perfectly round. And then as it goes through its path, it starts getting a little more oblong. And then as it gets closer to the ground, you can see that it goes back to its round shape just as it's hitting the ground, but then it has to squash back out. I'm a little off center on this one, I just noticed, so I'm just going to bring that back over there just a little bit more. And then that actually matches it a little bit more. And then what I would do is with the rest of these, you can see I kind of showed you how you would continue on with this path. I have to re-squash and stretch all of these in order to make them match and look more realistic. Now, just note that as each kind of like bounce that you do, it's going to squash and stretch a little bit less because it's not going as fast. So don't overstretch these or squash them. Now, but how did I do that? In the principle of squash and stretch, in that video that we had watched before, it talks about how the volume of an object needs to stay the same. So for instance, let me copy a ball real quick. Actually, I'll draw a new one. So I'm going to draw a new circle here, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this, actually it's perfect. It's 360 by 360. If I increase the width of this, just say to 400, the volume of this ball has now changed, okay? And the reason being is I've made it just wider, but I haven't done anything to the height to compensate for that width. It's like the inverse proportions in algebra. If one goes up, the other has to go down in order to compensate. So if I raised my width by 40 pixels, that means I have to lower my height by 40 pixels as well in order to compensate for this. Okay, so the volume of this ball versus the original ball, if we were to do it mathematically and figure it out, they would be the same because I changed both my height and the width by the same amount. Okay, and because they both started off at 360 pixels, it would be the same percentage. That'd be perfect. Okay, so if you are bad with the math here, what might be easier for you is instead of actually doing the minusing of the numbers, so if I put this back at 360, what you could do is, and then it should work, So if you do 90% here and just hit enter, it will take off 10% for you. So you can see it took off 36. That was perfect. So if I took off 10% from the width, I want to add 10% to the height. So if I just do 110%, you can see that, oh, it didn't add it. Let's see if I can do it again and see if it works. So 110%, it added it. I must have misclicked it by accident. So you can see how it automatically added 36 to us because that's 10% of 360. But yeah, so that's how you squash and stretch. So just make sure that also when you are doing this, you do a little rotation. If you need to rotate your object, there's that little ball that's up here. You just grab it and rotate it however you need it, left or right, or all the way around, however it is. So if you have any questions, just let me know, and good luck with your ball toss this time.